The great chamber was silent as Ambassador Yellen Vasquez walked toward the central platform, her boots echoing against the ancient stone floor that had witnessed 10,000 years of galactic politics. She was small compared to the beings around her, just a human woman with dark hair and tired eyes, standing before creatures that could crush mountains and beings made of pure light. The chamber of 10,000 voices stretched in every direction, a massive dome carved into an asteroid at the heart of the galaxy. And today, every seat was filled with representatives from civilizations that had ruled the stars, when humanity still lived in caves. High Arbiter Xenix, a towering figure with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that burned with cold fire, looked down at her from his elevated throne. Human ambassador. His voice boomed through the translation systems, filling the chamber with sound that made Yellen's bones vibrate. You stand accused of violating the sacred boundaries of the Forbidden Veil, a crime that carries the ultimate penalty under Concord law. Yellen did not flinch, did not look away, did not show any sign of the fear she was supposed to feel around her. Representatives from over 12,000 species watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt to something that looked almost like pity. The Galactic Concord had existed for 3 million years, a vast bureaucratic alliance that maintained peace through absolute control, and in all that time, no species had ever successfully defied their judgment. The infant race they called humanity behind closed doors, sometimes not even bothering to whisper it. 500 years of spaceflight meant nothing to beings who had watched stars die and be reborn. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Xenix asked, and his tone made it clear he expected groveling, expected tears, expected the desperate pleading that always came when lesser species faced the wrath of the Concord. Yellen cleared her throat and spoke in a voice that carried to every corner of the chamber. Our exploration vessel entered the Forbidden Veil by accident, she said calmly. We have already submitted the navigation logs proving this was not intentional, and we have offered compensation for any perceived violation of your laws. A ripple of laughter moved through the chamber, the sound of thousands of alien voices finding amusement in her words. Representative Kethvarus, an ancient being of crystalline light who had commanded fleets when humanity's ancestors were still learning to make fire, leaned forward in his seat. Compensation? He said, his voice like wind chimes in a storm. You think you can compensate for violating the most sacred boundary in the galaxy? The Forbidden Veil protects us all from what lies beyond, another voice added. This one belonging to a creature that looked like a mass of tentacles wrapped around a core of glowing energy. Your carelessness could have awakened something that would destroy everything we have built. Yellen listened to their accusations and kept her face neutral. She had been an ambassador for 30 years, and she had learned that showing emotion to these beings was seen as weakness. The Concord has deliberated, High Arbiter Xenix announced, raising one massive hand to silence the murmurs. And we have reached our judgment. He pressed a control on his throne, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber, showing the symbols of 1,017 civilizations. These member species have signed the decree of correction. Xenix continued. Humanity must surrender all colony worlds, all spacecraft, all weapon systems, and submit your entire population to cognitive restructuring. Yellen felt her heart skip, but she kept her expression unchanged. Cognitive restructuring was the Concord's polite term for rewriting a species' entire psychology, erasing everything that made them who they were and replacing it with compliant obedience. You will be remade into a peaceful and productive member of the galactic community, Xenix said, almost gently, as if he were offering a gift rather than extinction. Your dangerous unpredictability will be removed, and you will thank us for it in time. And if we refuse? Yellen asked. The chamber erupted in laughter again, louder this time. The sound of ancient beings who could not comprehend that a species so young would dare to resist. Refuse? Catfurrow said, his crystalline form flickering with amusement. With what army would you refuse, little human? He gestured, and the holographic display changed to show the combined military strength of the Concorde. 4 million warships from 1,000 different species. Vessels that range from sleek fighters to massive dreadnoughts, the size of small moons. All of them crewed by beings who had been waging war since before Earth's sun had finished forming. We have more ships than you have, people, Catfurrow continued. We have weapons that could crack your homeworld in half. And we have the experience of 3 million years of galactic dominance. He paused, letting the weight of those numbers sink in. You have nothing, he concluded. You are children playing at civilization, and it is time for the adults to take control. Yellen looked at the display for a long moment, studying the vast armada that was already gathering to invade human space. Then she smiled. It was not the smile they expected, not the desperate grin of someone trying to hide their terror, or the forced politeness of a diplomat buying time. It was the smile of someone who knew something they did not. High Arbiter, she said, her voice cutting through the lingering chuckles. I have listened to your judgment, and I have a response to deliver on behalf of the United Human Parliament. Xenix leaned forward, curious despite himself. In all his centuries of service, he had never seen a condemned species show such calm. We reject your terms, Yellen said. Simply. The laughter stopped. Furthermore, she continued, reaching into her jacket and pulling out a small communication device, we wish to inform the Concorde that humanity will not be surrendering, will not be submitting to cognitive restructuring, and will not be intimidated by your fleet. You dare, Xenix began, but Yellen cut him off. You have given us one standard rotation to comply, she said. We will use that time wisely, and I suggest your fleet commanders do the same. She activated the communication device and spoke 3 words that would change the galaxy forever. Wake the sleepers. Then she turned and walked out of the chamber of 10,000 voices, leaving 10,000 bewildered aliens staring at her retreating back behind her. Chaos erupted as representatives demanded explanations, as military commanders began shouting orders, as the great machine of the Galactic Concorde lurched into action. But Yellen did not look back. She walked calmly to her shuttle, climbed aboard, and began the journey home. As she left Concorde space, she allowed herself one small moment of sadness. She did not hate these beings, did not wish them harm. But they had made their choice, and now they would face the consequences. They thought humanity was young, thought humans were weak, thought 500 years of space travel was all there was to know about the strange apes from the 3rd planet of an unremarkable star. They were wrong. Humanity remembered things that other species had forgotten, kept secrets that would shatter the comfortable illusions the Concorde had built around itself. And when threatened with extinction, humans did not surrender. They survived. That was what they had always done. Through ice ages and plagues and wars and disasters that should have destroyed them 1,000 times over. And now the Concorde would learn why humanity had never stopped fighting, never stopped struggling, never evolved past the primal instincts that made them so unpredictable. The night was coming, and it would be the longest night the galaxy had ever known. Admiral Konstantin Reyes stood before a door that did not exist on any official map. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, where the rock was still warm from the planet's dying core. He was an old man now. 73 years of service written in the lines on his face and the gray in his hair. But his hands were steady as he pressed them against the scanner that would open the vault of endings. Identity confirmed, a voice said. Ancient and mechanical, speaking in a language that predated modern human speech. Admiral Konstantin Reyes, authorization level Omega, access granted to the Vault of Endings. The door slid open with a sound like a sigh. Like something that had been holding its breath for a very long time finally exhaling, Reyes stepped inside and began his descent. The elevator dropped for 17 minutes, passing through layers of rock and metal and something else. Something that seemed to drink in light and whisper at the edges of hearing when it finally stopped. Reyes found himself in a chamber that stretched beyond the reach of his vision. A vast cavern filled with machines that hummed with quiet power. This was humanity's greatest secret. The truth that no alien species had ever discovered. The answer to a question that the Concorde had never thought to ask. Why did humans seem so young when they were clearly so capable? Director Chen Wei met him at the base of the elevator. A small woman with sharp eyes and a nervous energy that never seemed to fade. "Admiral," she said, falling into step beside him, "we received Ambassador Vasquez's transmission an hour ago, and we have begun preliminary activation procedures." Reyes nodded, his eyes fixed on the massive structures that rose from the cavern floor like sleeping giants. "How long until they are fully awake?" he asked. 6 hours for basic functionality," Chun replied. 12 for full combat readiness. Though I should warn you that the sleepers have been dormant for 40,000 years, and we cannot be entirely certain how they will respond to activation. Reyes stopped walking and turned to face her. "Director, in 6 hours, 4 million alien warships will enter human space with orders to erase everything we are and everything we could become," he said quietly. "I need the sleepers ready, and I need them ready to fight." Chun nodded and gestured for him to follow her deeper into the vault as they walked. She explained what Reyes already knew but needed to hear again. The history that every human leader learned when they reached the highest levels of clearance. Humanity was not 500 years old. Humanity was ancient beyond measure. A species that had risen and fallen a dozen times across the vast sweep of geological time, each cycle ending in catastrophe and each new beginning. Starting from scratch, the first humanity had built cities when the dinosaurs still walked the earth. The second had traveled to the stars before an asteroid erased all evidence of their existence. The third had fought wars across dimensions. The fourth had transcended physical form entirely, and so on through cycle after cycle of rise and fall. But each time, before the end came, they left something behind for the next version of themselves. Gifts hidden in places that would survive whatever disaster was coming. The Vault of Endings was one such gift, left behind by the ninth humanity. A civilization that had achieved things that modern humans could barely comprehend. And inside the vault were the sleepers. They are not weapons in the traditional sense, Chun explained as they approached the first of the massive containment units. They are constructs of pure thought. War intelligences encoded into quantum substrates that can exist outside normal space and time. She pressed her hand against the containment unit, and a view screen flickered to life, showing swirling patterns of light and shadow that hurt to look at directly. The ninth humanity created them to fight the Hollow Ones. She continued, beings that existed in the spaces between dimensions and fed on conscious thought. And the sleepers defeated them, drove them back into the void, and then agreed to sleep until they were needed again. Reyes stared at the patterns on the screen and felt something stir in the back of his mind. Something ancient and hungry and utterly inhuman. Will they obey us? He asked. Chun hesitated before answering. They will honor the agreement made by our ancestors, she said carefully. They will protect humanity from existential threats. But I would not call it obedience exactly. She looked at him with eyes that held a warning. The sleepers are not servants, Admiral, and they are not friends, she said. They are something we made when we were something else. And they remember that we used to be gods. Reyes nodded slowly. Begin the activation. He ordered. Chun turned and began issuing commands to her team. And all around the vault, machines that had been silent for 40 millennia began to hum with power as the sleepers stirred in their long slumber. Rias walked to a communication station and opened a channel to Earth. "This is Admiral Reyes," he said. "Authorization code Omega 773. Initiate Protocol Midnight across all human territories. On Earth and Mars and the colony worlds scattered across 3 star systems." Military commanders received the order and began moving civilians into hardened shelters that had been built centuries ago for exactly this purpose. No announcements were made to the public. No warnings were broadcast. The evacuation happened quietly, efficiently, with the calm precision of a plan that had been rehearsed for generations within 4 hours. Every human civilian was safely underground, protected by shields and barriers that could withstand almost anything the Concorde could throw at them. And then humanity went silent, communication networks shut down, ships returned to port, and, powered off, their engine stations went dark too. The Concorde fleet approaching human space. It looked like surrender, like a species that had realized the hopelessness of their situation and simply given up. Admiral Kethvaros, commanding the invasion from his flagship at the center of the Armada, watched the human systems go quiet and felt a flicker of disappointment. He had hoped for a battle, had wanted to test his forces against these strange creatures who seemed so convinced of their own importance. Instead, they had simply collapsed, just like every other young species that had dared to challenge the Concorde. "All ships, proceed to primary targets," he ordered, his crystalline form pulsing with the colors of command. "Secure the human colonies and prepare for population processing." 4 million ships surged forward into human space, their sensors showing nothing but empty stations and silent worlds. They did not see the shadows gathering at the edges of their formation. They did not notice the stars beginning to flicker in patterns that defied natural physics. They did not understand that the silence was not surrender, it was anticipation. Deep beneath Mars, the last of the sleepers opened eyes that were not eyes and stretched awareness that spanned dimensions. They tasted the fear of 4 million alien minds approaching, and they found it sweet. It had been so long since they had hunted, so long since they had reminded the galaxy what humanity truly was. The night was beginning, and the sleepers were finally awake. Admiral Kethvaros had lived for 6,000 years, had commanded fleets in 17 major conflicts, and had never once felt the emotion that humans called fear. His species, the Luminari, had evolved beyond such primitive responses millions of years ago, replacing panic with calculation and terror with tactical analysis. But as he stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched his sensors begin to lie, something cold and unfamiliar crept into the crystal lattice of his consciousness. "Report," he commanded, his light flickering in patterns of authority. "Why have we lost contact with the outer formation?" His tactical officer, a being of flowing mercury who had served under him for 3 centuries, turned with movements that seemed somehow hesitant. "Admiral, I cannot explain what the sensors are showing," the officer said. "Ships are simply vanishing from our tracking systems, not being destroyed, not retreating, just gone." Kethvaros moved to the main display and studied the formation. Himself, when they had entered human space an hour ago, 4 million ships had been arranged in perfect geometric patterns, each vessel in its assigned position, each fleet segment coordinated with the others. Now there were gaps. Hundreds of ships had simply disappeared from the outer edges of the formation, leaving holes in the pattern like missing teeth in a smile. Were they destroyed? Kethvaros asked. Did the humans deploy some kind of weapon? "No, Admiral," the tactical officer replied. "There were no energy signatures, no debris fields, no distress calls, and our ships simply stopped existing between one sensor sweep and the next." Kethvaros felt that cold sensation again, stronger now. And he realized with distant surprise that this must be what fear felt like. He opened a communication channel to the fleet. "All commanders, report status immediately," he ordered. The responses came flooding in, and each one deepened the chill spreading through his crystal form. The hegemony's third fleet reported that 17 vessels had vanished during a routine patrol sweep. The collective's drone carriers reported that their automated systems were receiving signals from nowhere, transmissions in languages that no translation matrix could decipher. The Empire of Shadows reported that their crews were seeing things, shapes moving in the darkness between stars, figures that disappeared when lights were turned on them, and then the reports stopped coming. Not all at once, but one by one, communication channels went silent, each fleet segment falling quiet as whatever was happening spread through the formation. Like a disease, Kethvaros turned to his bridge crew and saw expressions he had never witnessed on alien faces before. The look of beings confronting something their evolution had not prepared them to understand. "Admiral," his communications officer said, her voice barely a whisper, "I am receiving a transmission from the collective command ship. Put it through." Kethvaros ordered. The bridge speakers crackled with static. And then a voice emerged, speaking in the collective's clicking language, but saying words that made no sense. "It comes through the walls," the voice said. "It speaks with 1,000 mouths, and none of them are real. And we cannot fight what we cannot see. We cannot kill what was never alive. We cannot." The transmission ended in a sound that Kethvaros would never forget. A scream that seemed to come from very far away and very close at the same time. "Admiral," his tactical officer shouted, "something is approaching the ship." Kethvaros spun toward the main view screen and saw nothing but empty space. The familiar darkness between stars that he had traveled through his entire life. But the darkness was wrong somehow. It seemed thicker than before, seemed to press against the hull of his ship like something trying to find a way in. "There is nothing there," he said, trying to convince himself as much as his crew. "Sir, the sensors say there is nothing there," his tactical officer replied. "But the hull pressure readings say something is touching us, and the temperature outside the ship has dropped to absolute zero." The lights on the bridge flickered in the moment of darkness. Kethvaros saw something standing at the far end of the room, a shape that was somehow darker than the shadows around it, with angles that hurt to perceive and a presence that made his crystal form vibrate in frequencies he had never experienced. Then the lights came back on, and the shape was gone. His crew stared at each other with expressions of pure terror. Beings who had never known fear now drowning in it. "What is happening?" Someone whispered. Kethvaros did not answer because he was beginning to understand. And the understanding was worse than the ignorance. The humans had not surrendered. They had been waiting for the Concord fleet to enter their space, to commit fully to the invasion, to put 4 million ships in a position from which retreat would be impossible. And now something was hunting them. Something that did not use weapons or ships or any technology the Concord could recognize. It simply reached into their vessels and took what it wanted over the next 3 hours. Kethvaros watched his fleet disintegrate. Ships did not explode or burn or break apart. Their lights simply went out, one by one, and when rescue vessels approached the darkened hulls, they found crews that were catatonic or missing entirely. The beings of 1,000 different species sitting at their stations with empty eyes and minds that had been scraped clean. The Luminari ships lasted longer than most, their crystalline crews more resistant to whatever was attacking them. The resistance only delayed the inevitable. At hour 4, something finally boarded Kethvaros' flagship. It did not come through the airlocks or hull breaches. It simply appeared on the bridge. A presence without form that spoke directly into the minds of everyone present. "Admiral Kethvaros," it said. And its voice was like nothing he had ever heard. like 1,000 humans speaking at once, like memories of violence and survival and endless struggle given sound. "We've been waiting for you," Kethvaros tried to respond, tried to form words of defiance or demands for explanation. But his mind was no longer entirely his own. The presence was inside him now, sifting through 6,000 years of memories, examining every thought and fear and hope he had ever experienced. "Your species forgot what fear feels like," the voice continued. "You evolved past it, called it primitive, called it unnecessary, and that was a mistake." Images flooded Kethvaros' consciousness. Images of humanity's past, of the dozen cycles of rise and fall, of wars fought against things that made the Concord look like children playing with toys. He saw the ninth humanity standing against the Hollow Ones, creatures that devoured minds and realities. And he saw them win through sheer refusal to surrender, through a willingness to become whatever they needed to become. "Fear is not weakness," the voice said. "Fear is what keeps prey alive, and you have forgotten that you were always prey." Kethvaros felt his consciousness fragmenting, felt himself becoming less than he had been, and in his final moments of coherent thought, he managed to send one desperate transmission. "We have made a terrible mistake," he whispered into the fleet channel. "The humans are not what they appear, and they are not young. And they are something that has learned to wear youth like a mask. And we must—" The transmission ended on the bridge of the Luminary flagship. The lights went out for the final time, and in the darkness, the sleepers continued their work, hunting through a fleet of 4 million ships, teaching ancient beings a lesson their ancestors had forgotten. The night was only half over, and the hunt had just begun. Ambassador Yelen Vasquez stood before the United Human Parliament in the Great Chamber beneath the Swiss Alps, addressing the representatives of a species that was about to change the galaxy forever. The chamber was quiet, every seat filled with politicians and generals and scientists who had been cleared to know the truth about humanity's past. 12 hours ago, 1,017 alien civilizations declared war on humanity. Yelen began, her voice steady despite the weight of what she was about to explain. They believed they were attacking a young and helpless species, children who had barely learned to walk among the stars. She paused, letting the silence stretch. "They were wrong," she continued, "and tonight, they are learning exactly how wrong they were." On the screens behind her, data feeds showed the current state of the Concorde invasion fleet, of the 4 million ships that had entered human space. Only half remained functional. The rest were dark, drifting, their crews either catatonic or simply gone. "The sleepers have been active for 6 hours, Yelen said, "and in that time, they have disabled more vessels than our entire military could have, destroyed in a century of conventional warfare." A hand went up in the audience. A young representative from the Mars colonies who had only recently learned the truth. "Ambassador, can you explain exactly what the sleepers are doing?" she asked. "Our briefing said they were weapons, but I have seen the reports, and they are not attacking like any weapon I have ever heard of." Yelen nodded. Having expected this question, "The sleepers are not weapons in the way you understand the term," she explained. "They do not fire missiles or deploy bombs or even directly harm the beings they encounter." She gestured, and the screen behind her changed to show a schematic of an alien brain, a luminary consciousness represented in patterns of light. The Concorde species evolved for millions of years in a galaxy that had become peaceful, she said. They developed past the need for violence, past the need for fear, past all the instincts that once kept their ancestors alive. She traced a finger across the schematic, highlighting the areas where fear and aggression would normally reside in a conscious mind. "These regions are vestigial in most Concorde species," she continued, "shrunken and inactive, like the appendix in a human body. And the sleepers are exploiting this weakness. The screen changed again, showing a comparison between an alien mind and a human one. The difference was stark. Where the alien brain showed smooth emptiness in certain regions, the human brain blazed with activity, neural pathways for fear and anger and desperation burning like fire. Humans never evolved past our primitive responses, Yellen said. We kept our violence, kept our fear, kept the chaos that makes us so unpredictable. And the Concorde always saw this as weakness. She smiled. And it was not a kind smile. They were wrong about that too. She nodded to the technician at the controls, and the screen changed to show footage captured from a disabled Concorde vessel. The footage was disturbing alien beings sat at their stations, staring at nothing, their bodies frozen in positions of absolute terror. The sleepers are attacking them with concepts, Yellen explained. They are injecting ideas directly into minds that have no defense against them, showing these ancient beings what it truly means to be afraid. She let that sink in before continuing. Imagine spending 6,000 years never once feeling fear, never once experiencing the primal terror of being hunted, and then suddenly having all of that crash into your mind at once, she said. Their brains cannot process it, and so they simply shut down. The young representative from Mars spoke again, her voice troubled. Is this not cruel? She asked. We are essentially torturing them. Yellen turned to face her directly. Yes, she said simply. It is cruel, and it is terrible, and I wish there had been another way. She walked to the edge of the platform and looked out at the assembled representatives. But they came to destroy us, she said quietly. 1,000 civilizations voted to erase humanity from existence, to rewrite our minds until we were no longer ourselves, to kill everything that makes us human. Her voice hardened. We did not start this war, and we did not ask for this choice. But when faced with extinction, humans do not go quietly. She turned back to the screens, which now showed the second half of the invasion fleet in complete disarray. Ships were firing on each other, their crews driven mad by paranoia, their commanders unable to tell friend from enemy in the spreading chaos. The psychological contagion is spreading, Yellen said. Beings who have never experienced fear are now drowning in it, and they have no tools to cope, no defenses to employ, and no experience to draw on. Admiral Reyes stepped forward from the side of the chamber, his face grave. At the current rate, the remaining fleet will be completely disabled within the next 6 hours, he reported. We have not lost a single ship, and we have not fired a single weapon, he paused. Then added something that made the chamber go silent. The sleepers have reported that they are enjoying themselves, he said. They have been asleep for 40,000 years. And they missed the hunt. Yellen felt a chill at those words. A reminder that the sleepers were not human, not anymore. Not really. They were what humanity had once created to survive impossible wars. And they remembered their purpose with a clarity that was almost frightening. What happens when this is over? Someone asked from the audience, what do we do with a galaxy that just tried to destroy us? Yellen had thought about this question for a long time, had discussed it with philosophers and generals and ethicists who understood the weight of what humanity was about to become. We do not conquer them, she said firmly. We do not enslave them or destroy them or take revenge for what they tried to do. She looked out at the representatives, at the faces of humans who had inherited a legacy they were only beginning to understand. We simply remind them that the galaxy was never as safe as they believed, she said. We show them that evolution toward peace was a choice, not a destination, and that some species chose differently. She straightened her shoulders and spoke, the words that would define humanity's place in the galaxy for the next 1,000,000 years. We are not conquerors or destroyers, she said. We are the species that remembers what others have forgotten. And the galaxy needs to remember that the darkness between stars was always hungry. On the screens behind her, another Concorde fleet segment went dark. The hunt continued. And the night was far from over, but somewhere in the chaos, surrender signals were beginning to flash from vessels whose crews had finally understood what they were facing. Not a young species fighting for survival, but something far older and far stranger. Wearing the mask of youth, wielding fear itself as a weapon, and absolutely refusing to die. Dawn broke over Earth, golden light spreading across the Atlantic Ocean and climbing the mountains of Europe. And Ambassador Yellen Vasquez watched it from the windows of the Parliament chamber with exhausted eyes. 12 hours had passed since the Concorde fleet entered human space. 12 hours of horror for the ancient civilizations that had dared to threaten humanity, and now it was over. Admiral Reyes approached her with a tablet in his hands, his face showing the same bone-deep weariness that she felt. "Final report," he said, handing her the device. "Would you like to hear it?" Yellen nodded, and Reyes began to speak. Of the 4 million Concorde vessels that entered human space, approximately 3 million are now disabled, he said. Their crews are catatonic, suffering from what our psychologists are calling existential shock, and a complete shutdown of higher cognitive functions, caused by exposure to concepts their minds could not process. He scrolled through the data. Another 500,000 ships surrendered during the final hours of the engagement. He continued. Their commanders chose submission over whatever the sleepers were doing to the rest of the fleet. And the remaining ships? Yellen asked. Fled, Reyes said simply. They broke formation and ran as fast as their engines could carry them, and they're still running, spreading across the galaxy with stories of what happened here. Yellen looked at the data on the tablet and felt no joy, only a heavy sadness. 3 million ships full of beings who had done nothing wrong except follow the orders of their governments, entire crews whose only crime was being part of a civilization that had made a terrible decision. The sleepers have returned to dormancy, Reyes added. They were reluctant to stop, and they kept saying they were having fun, but they honored their agreement. Yellen shuddered at the thought of what fun meant to beings that hunted through the minds of their prey. What about the Concorde itself? She asked. Reyes's expression grew even more grave. The Concorde is finished, he said. The psychological contagion spread through their communication networks, and when the survivors transmitted their experiences back to their homeworlds, the fear spread with them. He brought up a galactic map showing the 1,000 civilizations that had signed humanity's death warrant. Most of them were blinking red, indicating internal crisis or complete societal collapse. Several species have fallen into civil war, Reyes explained. Their populations are turning on each other, unable to process the fear that has suddenly infected their collective consciousness. He pointed to a cluster of systems near the galactic core. The Luminari have gone completely silent, he said. Our intelligence suggests that their entire species may have entered a state similar to hibernation, a defensive response to psychological trauma that they never evolved to handle. Yellen set down the tablet and walked to the window, watching the sun climb higher into the morning sky. We broke them, she said quietly. Without firing a shot, without destroying a single ship. We broke 1,000 civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. Reyes came to stand beside her. They tried to break us first, he reminded her. They gave us a choice between extinction and surrender, and we chose neither. I know, Yellen said, and I would make the same choice again. But that does not make this easy. She turned away from the window and straightened her shoulders. Pushing aside the weight of what had happened, there was still work to do. I need to return to the chamber of 10,000 voices, she said. Someone needs to deliver humanity's message to whatever remains of the Concorde. Are you sure that is wise? Reyes asked. The situation is still unstable, and there may be species who blame us for what has happened. Yellen smiled. And this time, there was no coldness in it, only tired determination. They need to hear from us, she said. They need to understand that we are not monsters, that we did not want this war, and that we have no intention of becoming the new rulers of the galaxy. She walked toward the chamber doors, then paused and looked back. The galaxy needs to know that humanity is willing to be a friend to those who treat us with respect, she said. But it also needs to know that we will never be victims again. 3 days later, Yellen stood once more in the chamber of 10,000 voices. The chamber was nearly empty now. Of the 12,000 species that had once filled these seats, only a few hundred had sent representatives to hear humanity's message. The rest were too broken, too afraid, or too busy dealing with the collapse of everything they had built. High Arbiter Xenix was gone, his crystalline throne empty, his species retreating into isolation to heal from wounds that had no physical form. Yellen walked to the central platform and looked out at the scattered beings who remained. Creatures from 100 different worlds who watched her with expressions ranging from fear to curiosity to grudging respect. I am Ambassador Yellen Vasquez of the United Human Parliament, she began, and I come with a message for all who can hear. Her voice echoed through the chamber, carried by speakers to empty seats and silent corridors. 3 days ago, 1,017 civilizations declared war on humanity, she said. They believed we were weak, believed we were young, believed we could be erased without consequence. She paused, letting the silence emphasize her words. They were wrong. She walked in a slow circle, addressing every corner of the vast chamber. Humanity does not seek war, she continued. We do not desire conquest. And we have no interest in ruling the galaxy or destroying those who once threatened us. She stopped and faced the largest group of remaining representatives. But we will not forget what happened here, she said. And we will not allow it to happen again. She raised her hand, and holographic displays appeared throughout the chamber, showing the message that was being broadcast across every communication network in the galaxy. To all species who hear this, Yellen said, reading the words that humanity had chosen. We offer friendship to those who approach us with respect, and we offer trade to those who deal with us fairly, and we offer knowledge to those who seek to learn. Her voice hardened. But we also offer a warning, she said. The galaxy was never as safe as you believed, and the darkness between stars was never empty. And humanity remembers what others have forgotten. She looked directly at the beings who watched her, meeting whatever passed for eyes in their alien forms. Threaten us again, she said, and we will remind you why your ancestors learned to fear the dark. The message ended, and Yellen lowered her hand. For a long moment, no one moved, no one spoke, and the chamber hung in perfect silence. Then, slowly, one of the representatives rose from their seat, a being of flowing water that had watched empires rise and fall for 1,000,000 years. They bent their form in what Yellen recognized as a gesture of respect, an acknowledgement of equals. The concord is gone, the being said, their voice like rain on stone. But perhaps that is not entirely a bad thing. And perhaps the galaxy needs species like you to remind us of what we have forgotten. Other representatives began to rise, adding their own gestures of acknowledgement, not submission, not worship, just recognition that humanity had earned its place among the stars, not through age or power or accumulated wisdom, but through something far more fundamental, the simple refusal to give up. Yellen bowed in return, accepting their recognition with grace. Then let us begin again, she said, not as masters and servants, but as neighbors sharing a very large and very dangerous galaxy. She smiled, and this time the smile reached her eyes. After all, she said, the night is over, and tomorrow is a new day. In the centuries that followed, new civilizations would rise to replace the old, and they would find them, records of this night in archives and databases, and the memories of species old enough to remember. And they would learn the lesson that the Concord had paid so dearly to teach. There are old species in the galaxy, and there are bold species, and there are species that have forgotten what fear feels like. But the humans are something else entirely. They are the species that learn to become the thing the darkness is afraid of, and they are still out there, watching the stars, remembering their past, and absolutely refusing to go quietly into any night